Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And you guys know my custom, and I'll always do this because this is what I believe, that the individual standing and coming before us is coming with a couple of things that I deem very expensive. That's their time. And they're willing to spend some of this with us. 24 hours is given to every creature on this planet. And Andrew is going to spend some of that with us. And I want to honor him and thank him for coming and spending some of this quality stuff with us. The other is the journey. The journey is a creator, and it created him. And it deposited a couple of things in Andrew that we want access to. Those things, we have labeled them as wisdom, knowledge, insights, all of these things we want access. Why? Because we want to become better human spirits while we occupy this beautiful place called the earth. Andrew, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much, Ken. I'm thrilled to be joining you.
It is an honor. I always tell my audience that I believe that there was a demand, Andrew, placed on your wisdom, your knowledge, and your insight, and that is why you are here. So I am honored to have you. One of the first questions that I ask everyone that presents is this, Andrew, and I'm going to surprise you and toss it your way, man. How do you serve mankind?
You know, for the last 35 years, I've been writing books about happiness and how we can have better relationships, how we can enjoy our work, how we can accept ourselves and forgive ourselves. And I sought to do that with books that are accessible and fun. So my primary mission is to give everyday people hope that life can be better. That is what I seek to do. Better because they come to believe in themselves, and that my readers come to see that as we apply certain basic principles, then life becomes less of a struggle and more of a blessing. And we get more joy and we gather momentum, if you like, and life continues to improve.
Yeah, life is series of laws, and when we activate one, it takes some time. Law of momentum as we move, and stagnation. I tell people stagnation is one of the enemies of personal development. If you look at nature, who's one of the greatest teachers out there, you'll see even the horses and the critters, the animals will not drink from anything that is stagnant because they know that is not a place to be. And so we should know better, but you know how we are. As you mentioned about that gentleman, I'm still laughing about that, Andrew. I think that is such a wonderful situation that he was in. But you have laid out so much in that on the onset of this podcast that I want to unpack, because there's so much stuff in there about forgiveness, about all those different things, beautiful, powerful spaces that we all have to visit in order to become a mature individual. One of our customs, Andrew, is to go back into this time machine via the memory to revisit a couple of spaces that we visit as we are moving through life to become, quote unquote, independent, if you will, to be on our own. And the very first space that we occupy as a human when we come to this planet is this house, this home that we have two individuals called mom and dad. And some of us have siblings and so forth. But in all honesty, Andrew, we were all a bunch of strangers, man, in this unit that is called family. What was your family like?
I was so blessed. I had loving parents. I had a mother who encouraged us to be, and I have a brother and a sister. So I had a beautiful mother who encouraged us to be conscientious students, and she would forever correct my grammar, which was probably helpful for a fellow who eventually became an author. And I had a father who was very creative. He was for a time an inventor.
Mm-hmm.
He spent 30 years of his life as a professional landscape painter.
Wow.
He loved to build stuff. He loved to enjoy the outdoors. And so I grew up in a household that not only was creativity, what's the word I'm looking for? Not only were we encouraged to be creative, but we were loved at the same time. And we were given the message that if you are happy doing what you're doing, then we're happy for you.
Yeah.
And so probably the stress that I went through maybe as a teenager and as an adult was more stress that I put on myself than ever came from my parents.
Yeah. I was talking to someone about this, Andrew. There's the stress that in some family where the spoken stress that a mom and dad would put on an individual. But then there's this unspoken stress that we put on ourselves. For whatever reason, we will pick this thing up and began to walk with it. And one of the things that I told people that the unspoken in my life, speaking to in my case, was that I felt that I had to please my parents in everything that I did, which they've never, I can't remember my mom and dad ever saying to me that I needed to do that. But I felt that I had to do that until it came to a crescendo. I tell people most of us live a life like Bolero. It's just have the little thumping until next thing we hear is cymbals crashing all over the place, and the noise is overwhelming that we pass out from it. But yeah, I understand what you're talking about. This underline or the unspoken thing that is there. We pick it up for some reason. I don't know why that is, Andrew. I don't know if you have any insight into that as to why do you think we pick it up. Do you have any idea as to what do you think in your understanding?
I probably part of it for me came from I was a very small child.
Mm,
When I was in high school, I was the smallest boy in high school when I was in first year high school. And I remember going home saying to my mother, I hate it. I'm the smallest boy and everyone makes fun of me and they say, your bag is bigger than you are, and all of the predictable kinds of things that people would say.
yeah.
And my mother said, well, wait another year. And in a year, there's bound to be some new students in the school. Someone's going to be smaller than you. So I waited a year. And a year later, there were another 100 students and they were all bigger than me. And I went home and said, well, that didn't work. And my mum said, well, wait another year. So I waited another year and went home and said to my mother, I still hate it and I'm still the smallest person in the whole school. And so by the time I was in third year high school, she said, well, let me share something with you. There's things in your life that you can change and there's things that you can't. And so you change what you can, and you can change your attitude, you can change your work ethic, you can change your friends. But she said, you can't change how tall you are, and you can't change your parents. So that was a lesson for me. I wouldn't say that I totally got it,
Yeah,
but I learned something about acceptance there. But I think also by being a tiny child, and eventually I did grow somewhat, I was probably out to prove something from a
yeah,
young age.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have tried to go back in my memory to see if there is something that I can grab onto as to my reasons. But I can understand yours, but I haven't been able to do that. But yeah, your mom and your parents both seem very wise in how they brought you up. And being in that beautiful lab, if you will, Andrew, how did, apart from the fact that you were shorter than the others, attitude wise, relationship wise, how did that being with your mom and dad and having this type of wisdom there available to you, how did it affect your relationship with others?
I believe that I related with other people fairly confidently because I felt that I was loved, and I continue to live in awe of people around me and people that I meet and readers that I meet who had so much more difficult beginnings than I did.
Yeah.
So I probably had a smart mouth because I was a little kid, and again, the little person syndrome. Um,
Yeah.
but I felt that, I was able to handle my schoolwork because I was encouraged, and I had these two parents who, one was, you know, like my father, very creative and encouraged me to draw and paint, and my mother took an interest in our schoolwork. So, it was just an extraordinary beginning, and very fortunate. And similarly, I think what it meant was that I grew up with an older brother and a sister with whom we developed a very firm and loving relationship that
Yeah.
have lasted for, well, I'm 67 and I'm the youngest, and we've never really had huge traumatic issues in our relationships
That
because
is
because there's been that foundation. Yeah.
that's what I was about to say. That's a powerful foundation, Andrew, to have in order to begin to build one's life from that space of honor and respect and love. And your parents afforded you some of the most powerful tools, I think. The fact that the expression of oneself through words and language. The other is the fact that you have ignited the imagination um, by that, allowing you to explore your mind to draw and stuff like that. Those are powerful tools to be able to utilize when you are walking in your quote unquote personal development. I tell people, Andrew, that the thought life or the imagination, if you will, and I use this analogy because I came out of the church and I grew up in the church. I forgot to say, let's create the earth in our image. He had to imagine that first. And so it had to originate somewhere. And the origination came from that imagination, which was mingling within the thought world. And then he began to express what he wanted via speaking what had begun in the thought realm. And he said, let there be, and there was. And he began to express all of those imagination stuff that he had to bring about what he wanted to do in his life, just like you and I have the ability to do as creators as well. So you're moving through life, man. Great foundation, Andrew, you have with mom and dad and your family and so forth. You're heading into college, into high school first. Let's stop in high school. How was your high school years, if you will? Did you get any taller? Did you step into high school and you weren't the short guy anymore? What was that time there in that location as you're moving forward in your life?
Well, in Australia, we have 5 years of high school and 7 years of grade school and no middle school. So the first couple of years of high school, I think I was a little bit rebellious and finding myself. And probably by my third year of high school, I was starting to be a little bit more secure in myself. And so I settled down and was making less trips to the principal's office. They used to cane people um,
Yeah,
in,
I
in
came from that
in
culture
those
back to
days.
myself.
Yeah. So I was getting less discipline from the teachers by the time my third year of high school, and I ended up being in student government and settled down to be a fairly serious student by my last year of high school, and
What
set out
changed,
to
Andrew?
to
What changed? What here you were, this kid that was being escorted into the principal's office or the teacher's office, if you will, and he begins to change. What was those things, Andrew, that began to penetrate your mind that caused your behavior, a change in the reflection of your behavior? What do you recall those things were?
I think that I matured. I think I got a sense of that at some I was never like an evil child.
Yeah,
I was more cheeky and probably disrespectful and rather than somebody who really needed, you know, intense discipline.
yeah.
So I probably matured to the point where I didn't feel that I always needed to make smart remarks,
Hmm.
and I probably began to have a vision that I was going to need to put together a solid academic record.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just, you get a little bit older and you settle down a bit, and your values change, and maybe some of my role models, some of the students that I admired and was emulating,
Yeah.
imitating, I decided actually they're not the ideal role models for me, and so I think I could say I took on some different role models.
That's pretty insightful for someone in high school, because most of us still visiting the principal's office, and we're still, we're still going, we're barely making it out of high school alive, basically, with our butts intact and stuff like that. So for a young man, a young adult, if you will, as he's coming into his young adulthood, to start making those changes independently and recognizing that those changes are necessary to be made. You're heading into college, Andrew. What was the conversation in your mind as to where you're going as a field of study, and why did you pick that field of study?
I was reasonably able in the arts, in writing history essays in English, and I did a certain amount of debating, and I was fairly comfortable on my feet, and speaking in front of a group. And so the assumption was that as a kid who wasn't very good at mathematics and had never done any physics or chemistry, that I wouldn't be a doctor or a surgeon. I could be a barrister, a lawyer, an
Yeah,
attorney. So in Australia, one goes directly from high school into law school.
yeah.
You don't have pre-law or anything. You're just in first year, second year, third year, fourth year law. So fortunately, I made it into law school, and by halfway through my first year of law school, I realized that nothing about it excited me at all.
Yeah.
And my big love was always drawing and painting, drawing portraits, painting portraits, watercolors, oil, charcoal, all of that.
Yeah.
And that was fueled by my father's passion for painting and his competence in that. So I remember when I said to him, Dad, I don't think I want to be a lawyer anymore. I want to be an artist. And he
Wow.
said, Great. Extraordinary, extraordinary. And so I said I knew of two particularly wonderful teachers at the Art Students League
Mhm.
in Manhattan, West 57th Street.
Yeah.
And one of the teachers taught anatomical drawing, and the other one taught portrait painting. And I earned money and was accepted to go and study in the Art Students League, and that's where I went.
And when you got there, Andrew, and this is the love, this is the in your inner being, this is your love. This is what you wanted. When you arrived there, how did that land in you as this individual after speaking to Dad and say, Dad, this is what I wanted? And that seed that was planted many years ago by Dad, hanging out with Dad and watching the process and so forth. And you are now in this field and learning the fine aspect of this field. How did you feel being there?
I was excited beyond anything I could have imagined, and because I had never been exposed to the quality of teaching that I had access to. Um, I was probably a somewhat gifted artist,
Yeah.
and I spent a lot of time at it. And the area of drawing and painting that I was so passionate about was portraiture and drawing the human figure.
Hmm.
And I was never able to find the kind of instruction that I needed to how do you put a body together? What did Rembrandt and Rubens and Michelangelo, what did they understand that I don't understand? And it was all there, to the point of how you can actually create an entire body from your imagination. You can draw it from the skeleton and then put all the muscles on it, and then create a body from any angle from your imagination. And with that kind of foundation, then you can draw what is in front of you so much better. So that kind of teaching was just extraordinary.
And as a young individual, now you are learning all of these aspects and so forth. And what began to happen to you internally as one walking on the planet? What was your relationship to others as you began to? Because one of the things that I remember teaching my kids when they were young, I said, find your passion and be passionate about it. And I tell them, I said, when you do that, when you find your passion and be passionate about it, when you are working 24 hours a day, or I would make a joke and say when you're working 40 hours in a day, and everyone looks at you and say, how can you do that? Aren't you exhausted? You're going to look at them, what are you talking about? Not understanding that when you are in your passion, it strengthens you. You gain power, you gain all of those stuff that someone that is not excited about what you are excited about, they would be exhausted in the first hour. And so what did it started to do to you, Andrew, as you are now gaining all this insight about the human body as far as the art and putting that together? The man, Andrew, the individual, that person, how was he living life?
I think I was probably impatient to improve, and so working crazy hours. And I was also ambitious because I wanted to create better art and become an artist like some of the artists that I knew. And so I think I was probably a little imbalanced because I was obsessed with
Yeah,
being a better artist and in studying and drawing and painting every day. So then that became my life for the next like 5, 6, 7 years. As I finished study, I went back to Australia. I was painting as an artist, and I also did a certain amount of teaching, to the point where by the time I was like 25, I suddenly made this shocking discovery, and it was that the happiest people I knew had bigger problems than me. And that made no sense. I mean, I thought that when my life got easier, then I would be happier.
yeah,
And I thought I have to find out why it is that there's people that I know that have come through cancer, or they've had their house burned down, or they've lost their jobs, or they've lost loved ones way too soon. So many of these people seem to find more meaning and more joy in life than I am finding, even though I'm doing what many people would think is idyllic, in that I'm painting paintings for a living, and I'm doing some art teaching as well. And so suddenly I felt almost like I'd retired too soon. Like,
hmm,
a lot of people do their work life for 30, 40 years, and then they retire into painting. And I
yeah,
began the life of an artist in my 20s. And whilst I was making a living, I felt there was a big hole there, because
yeah.
I felt life was passing me by, and there was lots of, I guess, evolving or maturing, or a lot of things I didn't know. And so suddenly I developed this passion for personal development, and that is what led to the books.
So when you started looking around, as you said, Andrew, and you saw that the other people around that should have been more sad than anything else are exhibiting just this joy and this degree of happiness to that you did not have, and you said it sparked you onto this journey of to seek more. When you began to seek, Andrew, what did you start to notice about you? Because it's always the things about ourselves as we began to investigate others and that journey of personal development. It's called personal development because it is personal development. So what did you started to notice about you? Because here you are exhibiting some of the things you in the art, very ambitious, these little undercurrents that are manifesting in ourselves, but we don't put any credence to it until much later, until we start digging. What did you started finding, Andrew, when you start digging in your personal development process?
Okay, well, I want to share something that was really interesting for me, which is not quite about me, and then we'll come back to me. There was a day, and it was the 19th of October, 1983, when I said to myself, enough, I've got to be a better and happier person from today.
Yeah.
And it was a day where I made that decision. My life is going to be better from today.
Yeah.
And within like 48 hours, I heard about a course that I'd never heard of before that I attended that was about meditation and relaxation and goal setting and the subconscious and all kinds of things that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And for reasons that I could not explain, I spent $1,000 that probably I couldn't afford to fly from Adelaide to Melbourne and do this 4-day course, which literally blew my mind. But the point is this, and I often share this with people, that when you make a decision and you say, I will do this and I don't even know how, it's like the universe moves to help you. And so that was the first thing that I came to understand. When you're really serious, then extraordinary things happen when you make that decision and say, I will be better. I will do this, whatever happens.
Andrew, I have some
What
insight
I
on that.
noticed,
I
please,
swear to you, I have some insight on that because I know exactly what you're talking about. And I believe, as I mentioned to you, I believe it is. Remember, we were talking about those two individuals, that is us. The mind of the flesh, this body, he
yes,
has his own thing, and his stuff is mostly the materialistic stuff, and he makes decisions and stuff like that. And then there's the subconscious mind. And I believe that when he makes a decision, Andrew, he will step up once in a while. And when he makes it, we know because he will say enough. And when he makes the decision, I believe the people call it the quantum realm, the heavenly places, all of the unseen world is activated because that is energy, power, and everything, Andrew. And I believe when he speaks, he pulls everything necessary for the outcome that he wants to make it happen. Because this story in the Bible about this woman with the issue of blood, that's where I got it from, Andrew. She said within herself, I was reading that, and she said within herself, if I could touch the hem of his garment, I'm going to get what I want. Who is there? It's that subconscious person. And when she said within herself, if I could touch the hem of his garment, I don't have to pull him. I don't have to tug him. I have to do nothing. I'll get what I want. And so she stepped out to do whatever. And when she touched him, Jesus said, who touched me? And I believe it is our subconscious being, Andrew. And when he speaks, I believe everything within the spiritual realm comes to the aid to make it manifest. And that's the person that we have to learn to give permission to speak every time. But that's the journey, man, that we have to learn how to give him control. But that's what I think is what happens to us
yes,
at that moment because we get tired of all the other
yes.
bullshit, if you will. I'm done, man. That's my thing that I believe that's what,
Yeah,
that's what I
thank you for
wanted to
that.
interject.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
think that's what it is. Go ahead, Andrew. I'm sorry. I just wanted to drop that in there because I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
I've
I
found.
appreciate that. So I guess I began to notice some things that we all notice. Like suddenly I was going off on this path that people didn't expect me to be going on, which was one of personal development, and that was when my father thought I was going off the rails because he had ideas of me becoming a great portrait painter, and I was headed off doing courses and fascinated with personal development. So he then became very concerned. And whereas my mother thought that I was actually starting to use, as I moved into initially running some weekend courses on personal development,
Yeah.
which happened first, she thought that I was beginning to use some other talents that had been left, you know, unexplored. And so my mother was happy and my father wasn't. And various, friends and family members felt that I was going off on some kind of regrettable tangent. But
Yeah.
but for me, there was no choice
Yeah.
because I knew that I was at a point in my life. I said to myself, I'm 25, but when I began this personal development journey, a third of my life is likely over, and I had always imagined that I would be a more joyous, more fulfilled person than I am. And I said to myself, it doesn't matter how beautiful a painting I paint. What's more important is what I do with myself, not what
Yeah.
I do with my paintings.
Yeah. And what did you started to learn about yourself, Andrew? What as you began to excavate and input all of that knowledge about personal development, as we began to look ourselves a little deeper under that microscope and investigate the reasons behind and the whys behind our thoughts and actions? What did you begin to notice about Andrew?
Well, I discovered for the first time that my thoughts create my life, and I was far more powerful than I had ever imagined, and that
Yeah.
I was becoming what I think about, and that I had to guard my thoughts very carefully,
Mm-hmm.
and that as I began and I began to set myself goals and realize how important goal setting was. In the process, with many of the people that I was now connecting with, I began to like myself better and began to forgive myself for not being perfect.
Yeah.
And that then improved my relationships with people because
Yeah.
uh, the relationship is all about with me. And
Yeah.
so as I began to like myself better, so and I learned, for example, that you people say, do you need to love yourself? Well, you need to at least like yourself because you create the life that you feel you deserve.
Yeah.
And so my life was becoming better and my relationships were becoming deeper and richer and my friendships were becoming better because I liked myself more.
Yeah, I don't see, Andrew, I don't see how someone could love me if they don't love themselves, or even if they don't like
Mm.
themselves. How can you, what is your benchmark? I would ask someone, what is your benchmark to prove and for you to know that you like me? If you have none, if you don't like you, it's the benchmark by which you know or you're familiar what it looks like. Because when you begin
Yes.
to love yourself and stuff like that, you have learned to forgive yourself. You talked about that on the onset, Andrew. You have to learn how to forgive you. You have to learn how to be patient with you. You have to learn how to be empathetic. All of those things that one has to express and is a part of any type of relationship, even with a friend. You have to learn how to be empathetic with a friend. You have to learn how to be respectful to a friend. You have to learn how to forgive. You have to learn how to be patient. So if you have no benchmark, Andrew, man, you're bullshitting, man. We ought to be, we need to be straight with people. You've got to go through that. One of the principles, again, I go back to the Bible because the Bible has those principles that are laid out there. And I study the I Ching and many other books, the Vedas and all these things, and those principles are all laid out there. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy mind and with all thy strength, and love the neighbor as you love yourself. You've got to love yourself in
Yeah.
order to love your neighbor because yourself is the benchmark by which you are now. And so if you don't love yourself, when you come to me and start yelling and screaming, I know who you are. You're speaking volumes. And so you don't respect yourself, you don't love yourself. Because if you do that, Andrew, and I'm in love with me, I will honor you because I understand the value of me. And then I would understand the value of you. And so it will make me honor you because I understand me. And so we will be able to disagree and yet be honorable. We will learn to be respectful because I understand the value that is me. And that same value is equal with you. You are not less than me. I am not more than you. We are valuable and priceless because I tell people I'm an endangered species. I'm one of a kind, and so is Andrew. So how I treat an endangered species as I treat myself, I'm required to honor Andrew the same way. So those that speak and tell me that, Andrew, I look at tell them says you haven't even started the journey yet because you don't even understand the base one. The first base of it is to love yourself and honor yourself. That's where you start. and then you move from there to the other places. And if you can't honor you, you can't honor me. And you're absolutely right. So here you are, Andrew, you're learning all of these things. How did you navigate to the book? I know you're teaching, you're doing those parts of that. You're also inputting more and learning more. How did how did you give birth to that? And I know you probably made mom proud because mom has been correcting your English for a long time. How did those things begin to percolate and then manifested as you are moving through your life?
One of the things that stunned me was that I had gotten to the age of 25 and been so ignorant about some basic happiness concepts and personal development concepts. And I began reading voraciously. I read about 200 books on happiness and the subconscious and personal development and management and anything I could get hold of. And I noticed that whilst a lot of them had good information, a lot of them were really boring. A
Yeah.
lot of them used unnecessarily long words, and none of them had cartoons. And I was also a cartoonist. I thought, well, why don't I write the book that I wished I'd had that would have helped me if I'd come across it? And I also had the idea that everybody seems to enjoy flicking through magazines, or most people do, because they are accessible and they have headings and they have pictures. And many people are intimidated by books. So, can I write a book about happiness for people who hate self-help books or for people who don't even read? And so that was my idea. That was my mission. And the other thing was, Ken, I was already doing personal development courses and running personal development courses, but I had no credibility. I was an artist, which doesn't really give you credibility, and I was someone who had started a law degree that didn't finish. And I thought maybe if I can write a book, that will that will make people take me seriously. So those were the ideas behind the creation of Being Happy. And it had a slow start, and most publishers that saw it said, well, we're not sure why you're writing a personal development book with cartoons in it. Doesn't seem very appropriate. So I'd written one book before Being Happy, which was a children's book, which was rejected by 61 publishers. So I knew it can be difficult to
Yeah.
get a publisher. I was much more selective, and I only sent the manuscript for Being Happy to 17 publishers, all of whom rejected that one.
Yeah.
But publisher number 18 said, we think your book needs more cartoons. So I thought, not that I was in any position to make any judgment. By now I was desperate. Anyone could have
Yeah.
said to me, we'll publish your book and we'll pay you absolutely nothing. And I would have jumped at it. But this 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 publisher said, we like your idea. And this was a publisher in Singapore. Now, I tell you this little story because I think it's also like an illustration of how life works for us. If we put in the work, if we put in the effort, very often the opportunities come from where we least expect them. And
Yes,
so
always.
I'd sent out 17 versions of this manuscript, all rejected. And I was flying to Sweden from Australia to give a personal development course. And I happened to be having lunch with a friend of mine in Singapore. And I said, I've written this manuscript. I've sent it to everyone I can think of. It's been rejected by everybody, but Jackie, you might like to read it. And she said to me, oh, there's a publisher that lives in my apartment building. I'll show it to him. And I thought, yeah, so, that was not part of where I thought any opportunity was going to come from. And a week later, I flew back into Singapore on my way back to Australia. And she said, this publisher likes your book, and his wife is an editor of a woman's magazine in Singapore called Female Magazine. So she knows what people like, and they think that this book could sell 1 million copies. Had a meeting, and they published the book, and away we went. but it was not remotely on my radar that I wasn't even trying to
Yeah.
get it to a publisher in Singapore.
Yeah.
But I think if we put in our best effort to whatever it is that we're trying to achieve, very often the breakthrough opportunity comes from a place that we never imagined.
We never least expected. And so that's what we were talking about. We have to learn how to detach from the expectation of the outcome as what we think it should be, because that's all we know, Andrew. We know these 17. We don't know anything about Singapore. We just know these 17 that you picked and the ones on the outskirts of what you know. But we don't know anything about Singapore. But I'll tell you, someone else does. And so we have to learn how to surrender to that. And I always tell people, man, it is usually from a conversation that will take place that you least expect. You will meet and say something. It's an encounter that is as simple as anything. And you will leave that encounter going, yeah, whatever. And, you don't have any expectation out of it. And that was the encounter that was necessary for you. And that is why I say to you from the onset, Andrew, I do not believe that any meeting that we ever have is ever just by happenstance. It's always a purpose behind it. Is what the thing we have to learn is how to be present within it. What is our purpose within that meeting? Within that conversation that we're having with that individual, what is it that we need to be able to receive, give? What is it? And I think if we learn how to put ourselves in that awareness, like you were just talking, you were like, I think you might like this, Jackie, whatever, and you're out of there. And next thing you know, there it is. All you guys that are listening to us, man, Andrew has a couple of books, and we're going to provide the links for you guys to get his books. There's one book that I want him to highlight for a brief moment. There's a couple of steps in there for those that are having a little tough time. It's called bouncing back. And the part of being happy is very important. Many of you are in situations that you don't know you have no clue how to come out or what anything, you're just lost. I have an individual that has some insight into that, and we're going to provide, and I always encourage you guys. You may have a friend that is going through some stuff. You're witnessing them going through things and you don't know what to say. Buy some books. I have Andrew, he has a couple of books that you give to them as presents and sit back and watch what will happen to them. In his book, Bouncing Back, he has 7 steps how to rebound from any situation that you're in. And many of you are in some dark spaces, if you will, and you don't know. You're maybe listening to this podcast going, I don't know what to do. I'm lost. Andrew, talk to them, because we have been lost and we were there in those dark places. And I tell people, when you're in the dark places, that's when your creator that is in there, the subconscious mind, is begging to come out because he's ready to show you some stuff. Talk to those folks, Andrew, that are in that space. You remember being there. Talk to Andrew, if you will, that Andrew that was back then, that didn't have that information and the data that you now have as you came out, about those seven steps that you utilized eventually to come out. And you can come out anytime once you utilize those 7 steps. And again, you guys, we're going to provide the links for you to get these books and study them and put them inside your being so that you can always regurgitate it, come out of every single one, every single time. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sure. Well, I did isolate 7 things that resilient people seem to do. They're not things that we need to do in any particular order, and they're not things that we need to do all at the same time. But let's talk about three things. Let's keep it simple. Three things that resilient people do that can make our journey more comfortable and easier. And we're all bouncing back from something. We're bouncing back from eating too much or spending too much, or bouncing back from a relationship that started out well, or bouncing back from a promotion that we thought we were going to get but we didn't. So the first thing that I talk about in bouncing back is the idea of acceptance. Let's say something happens to us that we don't like. Let's say you thought you were going to get a promotion that you didn't get, or let's say someone drives into your brand new car and smashes it up, or let's say you had this new relationship with somebody you thought was going to be your forever partner and they dump you. A lot of people have the idea that if I don't accept it, then I won't be stuck with this thing that I don't like. And the reverse is actually true. That the moment we say, I wouldn't have chosen this, but I accept what has happened, then we move into a position of power. We have to understand that it is the things that we wouldn't have chosen very often that turn us into extraordinary people. I have a cartoon in Bouncing Back where there's a guy climbing a mountain and he's sweating and his dog is sweating and he looks like he really doesn't want to be there. And the caption is, what you thought was breaking you is probably making you.
Yeah.
And isn't that wrapped up in this idea of acceptance that I didn't want to be here, but as soon as we accept something and say, okay, I have this, I wouldn't have chosen it, that is when we start to make some serious progress. I also say in Bouncing Back that nobody is born extraordinary. We become extraordinary by facing challenges that we didn't choose. And the other thing about what we perceive as disasters is that most disasters are not total disasters. You're at the airport, you're waiting to get on a plane, and your flight is cancelled, and you say, this is the last thing I needed, I hate this, and now I'm stuck here for another 5 hours. But how often does it happen? And especially when you accept it, you say, okay, I'll make the most of it, and you find a book or you meet something and it changes the entire trajectory of your week or your year or your life. Most disasters are not total disasters.
Yeah.
So the first thing about bouncing back is being able to look at it from a different set of eyes and say, I can accept this. The next thing that resilient people do is they just say, I just need to deal with this difficult situation one day at a time. 24 hours we can manage. If you were to gather together everything that you might want to eat in the next 5 years and everything that you might want to wear in the next 5 years and put it all in a sack and carry it around on your back, you would collapse at some point. Yeah. Similarly, if you make a list of everything that you need to do in the next 5 years and everything that could go wrong in the next 5 years, you will probably collapse. But you are perfectly designed to handle life one day at a time. So resilient people say, I will do my best until bedtime and I'll let tomorrow take care of it itself. So number one, acceptance. Number two is dealing with life one day at a time. And another big thing is having a vision for how we want our life to be, that we become what we think about. And if there's anything that you want in your life, if you want to have a happy relationship and you haven't had one until now, then that happy relationship begins as an idea in your mind. More money in the bank begins as a seed in your mind that I can have this, I can do this. Or satisfaction in a job begins as a seed in your mind and you begin to see it and you replay it. And what began as something that seemed impossible or that's something that other people have becomes, okay, that's becoming something that is possible for me. So we create a better life by persistently seeing that in our mind, and we become what we think about. So that's number 3.
Hey guys, the stuff that Andrew just laid out is just a part of it. And that's why I say to you, buy his books. We're going to provide all those links for you to have access to that. And he has many other things there. So get in touch with Andrew, because again, these are the principles by which one become. And that is, you become what do you want to become? And so it is up to you, as Andrew laid out there. You have to have a vision of what you want to become. And then you have to start dancing with that vision within your imagination and allow it to grow and make a difference in your life. And as he said, it all starts with you changing your perspective. How do you look at your problem? Do you look at it as the big disaster? Or do you look at it as an opportunity to read a good book or meet a stranger? How do you look at I used to tell my children as they were growing up, how you look at your situation will dictate how long you stay in your situation. The minute you change your perspective about that, you have just, because you're no longer, it's a totally different space. You're totally out. So how long it takes you to change your perspective about that situation is how long you're going to be in that. So it is all up to you. The power of your choice, the power of you. And Andrew has a lot more of these nuggets, these wisdoms, these principles to get you free from where you're at. Purchase his books, get it as friends, give it as gifts for friends and so forth. Andrew, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment, man. Thank you for allowing us into your world, into your space, your wisdom, your knowledge, your time, man. These precious things that you have afforded us an opportunity to dance with for a few. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.